Poyang Lake is the largest freshwater lake in China. It's located in the southeastern province of Jiangxi and serves as an important water source for agriculture, industry, and wildlife. Poyang's also the main stopover for 500,000 migratory birds. But despite all that, the lake, well, let's just say it's pretty inconsistent in size. In the winter, the water level is usually low. Then come the summer rains, which swell the Poyang as water flows in from the Yangtze River. That's how it's always been. Until a few years ago when something happened. In the summer of 2022, the lake's water level didn't rise. This photo was taken by a satellite on August 8, 2021. And here's what that same spot looked like a year later, captured by a satellite on August 22, 2022. The lake, which typically covers around 1,350 square miles at its peak season, simply dried up and never managed to recover by summer. This forced workers to dig trenches to keep the water flowing for irrigation farmland in one of China's key rice-growing regions. That was when Jiangxi province declared a red alert for water supply for the first time. In just 3 months, the water level in Poyang Lake dropped from 63 feet to 23 feet and kept falling. At the same time, there was 60% less rainfall than the year before. The heat was relentless. As a result, the lake shrank to just 25% of its usual size. Something had to be done about it, and out of the blue, China came up with a really unexpected way out. Let me grab my coffee and I'll tell you what it was. Just an unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video if you tend to forget by the end. First of all, it's worth mentioning that the drought that year was brutal. It didn't just dry up the lake, it also left rivers parched, including the Yangtze, the longest river in Asia. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the river got 80% less rainfall than usual. This forced several nearby factories to shut down due to a shortage of hydroelectric power at the Three Gorges Dam. The Yangtze River provides drinking water for over 400 million people and is a key waterway for China's economy. It's also crucial for the global supply chain. But in the summer of 2022, the Yangtze hit a record low water level. There was so little water that many sections and dozens of tributaries dried up. According to China's Ministry of Water Resources, the summer rainfall in the Yangtze River Basin in 2022 was the lowest since they started tracking it in 1961. This led to an unprecedented drop in water levels in the Yangtze and its tributaries, including Poyang Lake. The lake officially entered the dry season on August 6, 2022, earlier than ever since 1951. Of course, drought doesn't come alone. Around 267 weather stations across China recorded record-breaking temperatures in August 2022. Water levels in 10 reservoirs in the neighboring Anhui province dropped below the dead pool mark. That meant they could no longer release water downstream. The high temperatures also triggered wildfires, forcing 1,500 people in the southwest to evacuate. As I mentioned, factories had to cut back on production because hydroelectric plants were generating less power due to the drought. The extreme heat, combined with the dry spell, caused crops to wither. All of this was linked to what's called a stuck jet stream, a river of air that moves weather systems around the world. This current brought a heat wave crashing down on China, lasting at least 64 days, making it the longest one in over 6 decades since records began. There also was the highest number of counties and cities where temperatures went over 104 degrees Fahrenheit since monitoring started. People did their best to survive as best they could. Some train stations in the provinces dimmed their usually bright lights to save electricity. On photos and videos on social media, you can see creepy scenes of people sitting in dark train cars in Chongqing and walking along dark streets. Some companies, it's reported, used big blocks of ice to cool their offices, also to save on air conditioning. In general, there was no choice. They had to make it rain. But not just like that. In China, everything's complicated, and even rain was decided to be summoned with rockets. They're small, but they carry payloads of silver iodide rods designed to trigger the rain. The rockets are fired towards the clouds, almost like shooting at them with artillery over various provinces and counties. In addition to rockets, Chinese authorities have also launched large drones over Sichuan province, another central region of the country. These carry bursts of silver iodide into the atmosphere, also to bring on precipitation. This isn't exactly something new for China. Operations to make rain or snow have been carried out here before, usually during important agricultural seasons and critical periods when crops need water. A full-scale cloud shooting operation is launched in response to natural disasters like droughts, abnormally high temperatures, and the threat of forest and grassland fires. Basically, it's a pretty common practice. For example, they did it again in the fall of 2024. But cloud seeding can be different, and the technologies depend on the conditions and locations. For example, planes that make artificial rain are the best equipment for spreading catalysts in low clouds. The detection devices on the planes can also track and control changes in the cloud state before and after the operations. Plus, the plane is highly maneuverable, meaning it can cover a larger area. Rocket and artillery operations, capable of spreading catalysts and forming ice nuclei at higher concentrations than air operations, are especially useful for targeting clouds that are hard for planes to reach. In short, they're used where it's higher. There are also ground-based smoke stoves, the most silent equipment for creating artificial precipitation. These smoke stoves, which intensify rain, are often used in anti-cloud operations in mountainous areas. The operator sets up the device on a windward slope, and when the weather conditions are favorable, they send a signal to ignite it using a computer. The combustion reaction of the strips containing the catalyst is triggered, and the updraft sends it up into the clouds. These ground-based systems work not only in the mountains, but also in cities. They're especially useful where it's difficult or impossible to get a license to operate in airspace. As for the smoke doesn't need a license. There are also drones. Unlike traditional ground pyrotechnics or aviation operations, they can fly through clouds due to their maneuverability and drop rain-triggering chemicals in the best location. Drones aren't restricted by terrain or weather conditions, making them especially useful for tough terrain or fluctuating weather. You could say they're like a new concept in cloud seeding. And here, I guess it's time to explain how all this works in the first place. Stick with me. Clouds form when air containing water vapor rises into the atmosphere, cools down, and forms ice particles. When enough of these particles stick together, a cloud is formed. Inside the cloud, the ice particles merge, getting bigger and heavier, and at some point they fall to the ground as precipitation, rain, snow, or hail, depending on the temperature and other weather conditions. When clouds are seeded, tiny particles of silver iodide are added to them, a salt with a crystal structure similar to ice. This process can be done in different ways, but the point is that the salt needs to end up in the cloud. This method allows you to trick the water vapor inside and make it form droplets around these silver iodide particles. After that, it follows the routine. The droplets get too heavy and turn into precipitation that falls to the ground. And although cloud seeding has been practiced worldwide since the 1940s, China has the largest program in the world. They affect the clouds more effectively and probably more often than anywhere else. For example, cloud seeding was used before the Beijing Olympics in 2008. In the summer of 2021, the government sent rockets to clear the air over the polluted and cloudy capital before the Congress dedicated to the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party. By the end of 2022, the country had 56 aircraft of various types for artificial weather modification operations, and around 17,000 ground stations for artificial weather modification were built in different locations, including 6,235 standardized stationary control points. And there are also rockets and drones. Looks like they didn't make it into the overall stats. Anyway, all of this is yielding pretty good results. Thanks to efforts to boost regional weather control in northeast China, the average annual rainfall increased by 27% compared to the previous period. As a result, the average annual grain production went up by 11.6 million tons. It's not just about inducing rainfall, but also preventing it. For instance, in Yunnan, the meteorological department has been running artificial hail removal operations for a long time, which has significantly reduced the damage to tobacco and cut losses by over 1.6 billion yuan a year. Recently, Xinjiang has also improved its ability to carry out hail prevention operations, and the average yearly losses of cotton and other important crops from hail have decreased by over 70%. In addition, during the forest fires in the Huzhong Nature Reserve in 2018, artificial rain enhancement operations played an important role in putting out the fire. There are even satellite remote sensing data showing that since the adoption of the 13th five-year plan, the vegetation cover in the Sanjiang Yuan area has been gradually increasing, and the area of Qinghai Lake has grown by about 143 square miles. This is the lake. The green outline shows its boundaries in 2004, and the orange one today. The area of desertified land in the Xiliang Mountains is also continuing to shrink. But what about 2022, the year I started talking about? Back then, 4 national high-performance aircraft were involved in rain enhancement, plus 2 large drones. And it worked. According to the stats, from June to mid-November 2022, artificial rain enhancement in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River in high-temperature and drought-prone areas affected an area of about 976,000 square miles, and the total increase in precipitation amounted to about 8.56 billion tons. Later in 2023, the Meteorological Department, taking advantage of favorable weather, increased the rainfall by about 2.7 billion cubic feet, which effectively eased the meteorological drought in Xiangyang County. This is in the southeast of China, on the southern bank of the Yangtze River. To achieve this, 53 ground-based operations were conducted to artificially induce rain, including the use of 5 anti-aircraft guns and 32 rockets. All of this in just 1 week. But it's important to understand that you can't just rely on rockets, drones, airplanes, or smoke on the ground. Precipitation doesn't just appear out of nowhere. You need at least a few clouds in the parts of the sky where you want to bring rain, and some regions of China, which are most in need of water, don't have enough cloud cover. People still can't create rain clouds from the air. And that's where the problem lies. During extreme heat events, there might be few clouds because there's less water on the ground to evaporate into the atmosphere above. This is already causing problems and conflicts. I found an article from 2004 that described the struggle of 5 cities in Henan province for a cloud. There was a drought, and water from this cloud could only go to one of them, and the cities were practically fighting over it. Well, not literally, of course, but everyone gathered as many resources as possible, positioned as much artillery as they could, and just waited for the moment when the cloud would shift in their direction. And they all argued like crazy during the process about which city needed it more. But cloud seeding isn't something that only happens in China, of course. The first attempts to pull something like this off were made by American scientists at the General Electric Research Lab in the 1940s. Today, this method is well established and used in many countries around the world. I've already mentioned that Beijing used this technique to make it rain before the 2008 Summer Olympics. Russia is also known for using cloud seeding before big holidays to prevent rain from ruining large events. In 2016, Russia reportedly spent $1.43 million on cloud seeding to ensure dry weather during a holiday. This method is mainly used today to make it rain in areas experiencing drought. The U.S. also uses cloud seeding, especially in the western states, which have been severely affected by drought like Idaho and Wyoming. The United Arab Emirates has been cloud seeding since the 1990s and carried out at least 185 cloud seeding operations just in 2019. And if you look back, you'll see that the U.S. used it as a weapon during the Vietnam War to extend the monsoon season and turn the land into mud from all the heavy rain. The last example clearly shows that technology designed for good can always be used for something else. But there are other factors that make some experts skeptical about whether cloud seeding is a good idea. For example, if you seed clouds over your region to fight drought, those clouds won't bring rain to a neighboring region where it could provide a much-needed rainy break. And the 5 Chinese cities fighting for one cloud should all agree on this. When you bring rain to one place, you reduce it further down. By the way, remember how we've talked a few times in the past couple months about situations where countries share river water that flows through several countries, and these countries are literally ready to go to war over water? But rivers are on land, so dividing them is pretty straightforward and relatively clear. But rain and clouds in general, that's a whole different story. There's no regulation yet for shared use of clouds, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point it appears, and dividing clouds could even lead to international conflicts. Experts also warn that weather management could turn out to be too complicated to go smoothly, and they worry it might distract from more traditional measures aimed at dealing with climate change. If you believe them, geoengineering, including large-scale cloud seeding, is a dangerous experiment that could lead to unforeseen consequences. And if humanity wants to tackle serious droughts or floods, it needs to fix the cause, which is global warming, not fight the consequences. Some scientists also doubt that cloud seeding actually works. If you go ahead and seed a cloud, then look at how much rain or snow falls, you won't know how much would have fallen without seeding. There's a 2019 study where the authors found that certain forms of cloud seeding can increase precipitation by up to 20%, but that's if you target winter clouds in mountain regions. There's no consensus on whether cloud seeding works in the summer when clouds have little or no ice. Moreover, many studies have shown that cloud seeding has no effect on rainfall. Why are the opinions so different? It's simple. Although the technology is widely used around the world, it still isn't very well understood. There are some debates about its cost. The cloud seeding program in Wyoming, for instance, could range from $27 to $214 for 317,000 gallons of water in a low-cost scenario, or from $53 to $427 if the costs are higher. A typical 4-hour operation that seeds 24 clouds costs around $5,000. But it really depends on the location and the specific dates, because seeding gets more expensive too. In 2022, the UAE carried out 311 cloud seeding missions, which took almost 1,000 hours. In 2023, the cost of those 1,000 hours would be about $1.25 million. Gavin Schmidt, the climatologist who's the director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, is pretty sure that cloud seeding has always been a thing for people with more money than common sense. He says it's a huge waste of money that probably won't do much good. By the way, what about the harm to people and nature? After all, these are chemicals in the clouds, right? Naturally, there's no single opinion on this either, but Chinese meteorology experts claim that the catalyst for cloud seeding is dry ice, which is solid carbon dioxide, as well as liquid nitrogen, silver iodide, and so on. Silver iodide, however, is used in very small amounts. The main components are dry ice and liquid nitrogen, which, when they evaporate, turn into carbon dioxide and nitrogen. Both are the main components of the air, therefore they are all environmentally safe catalysts and do not pollute the environment. As for silver iodide, the World Health Organization has set a safe standard for silver ion content in drinking water and the environment, which is no more than 0.000002 ounces per 0.2 gallons of water. Seeding doesn't even give that small of a concentration, so everything should be safe, it seems. Anyway, the world's still far from adopting this kind of drought-fighting practice. Experts are confident the method should be a part of a broader water plan that involves conserving water efficiently. In other words, you can't just trigger precipitation in one region. It won't help fix the drought because it's driven by the climate crisis. And we shouldn't forget about the political risks either. Experts agree with me on this. However, despite the debates, cloud seeding seems to be becoming an important part of the climate change combat program. The most important news in recent days is that I've updated my pepper spray. The old ones had expired. I always carry them with me everywhere. One, the aerosol type, is always in my pocket or bag within quick reach. The other, the stream type, is in my car. You never know when it'll come in handy. Saving the crops. Today we talked a lot about how China is constantly facing droughts. The Yonghe County in Shanxi province is no exception. Its residents turned to the authorities for help, saying they've recently been facing crop failures. There's been no rain for over a month, and crops like corn have started to die off. The situation was made worse by the fact that this area is mountainous, so irrigation is nearly impossible, and people mainly rely on rainfall. You get where I'm going with this? The locals literally asked the authorities to summon the rain. Help arrived pretty quickly. The Agricultural and Rural Bureau of Yonghe County, along with the local meteorological office, stated that they're closely monitoring changes in the weather. Locals filed a complaint about the drought in mid-June 2024, and by June 21st, rainfall arrived in Yonghe County. Yes, you got that right. China once again created artificial rain. On the night of June 21st, a total of 56 rockets with reagents were launched at 4 standard operation points in Yonghe County, and the result didn't take long to show up. According to the people from the county, from late June to early July, the county had a few rains, the drought finally eased, and the crops were saved. Of course, the local government isn't stopping there. Officials promised to continue strengthening measures to boost drought resistance. In addition to carefully monitoring weather conditions and creating artificial rainfall at the right time, the authorities said they would send specialists to the county to help farmers. Well, just in case something goes wrong with the rain. Moving underground. What would you do if the temperature outside rose to 104 degrees Fahrenheit? Many would likely stay inside with the air conditioning, but the residents of southwestern China came up with some pretty creative ways to beat the heat. People in Shanxi and the neighboring Sichuan province hid underground. Experts say the intense heat wave in 2022 was one of the most extreme in history. It made the severe drought in China even worse, and even led some train stations to dim their bright lighting to save power. Well, I've mentioned that already. They also saved electricity in government buildings in Sichuan. There, the temperature in air-conditioned rooms was kept no lower than 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Very hot. When the workday ended, people rushed underground. To restaurants. Originally, they were just seen as unusual places to hang out, but during the heat, these restaurants became a real refuge for people. While it was about 107 degrees Fahrenheit outside, inside the restaurant, it was pretty cool, just 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The locals spotted another shelter option in the underground tunnels. They'd spread out mats and hang hammocks from the beams, and I completely understand them. Who'd choose the outside when it's cozier underground? Thunderstorm caused by rain. Back in September 2024, there were reports that artificial rain triggered by the Shanxi Meteorological Bureau caused strong winds in over 20 districts and counties. The winds hit speeds of 113 feet per second, which led to certain consequences. Numerous roadside trees were knocked down and a few street billboards were blown away. Locals caught it all on video and said the bad weather was a result of the artificial rain. But is that true? According to the staff at the Meteorological Bureau, these events are completely unrelated. Yes, there were strong winds, but they were caused by natural conditions. Artificial precipitation couldn't have led to a storm, as the chemicals have a limited range and simply can't spread across the whole city. By the way, why did China once again make it rain? The answer's the same as always: hot weather and drought. At that time, the Shanxi Meteorological Observatory issued a red alert, as in many places the temperature was close to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. This went on for several days in a row, and something urgently needed to be done. Well, the city services did something. Taking advantage of favorable weather conditions, they created artificial rain. On September 2nd, 2024, 158 anti-aircraft shells and 37 rockets were launched, and 24 smoke stoves were lit. As a result, after just a couple of hours of rain, the temperature in some areas dropped from 100 degrees Fahrenheit to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Not a bad result, but it didn't last long. The next day, the temperature rose again and reached 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Why did this happen? Despite artificial rains, Shanxi was still under the influence of subtropical high pressure from the western part of the Pacific Ocean. The rainfall couldn't overpower it. You owe me a like. See you later.